Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Message in Blood, a Chiara Corelli mystery, by Catherine Maiorisi, narrated by Abby Craden. Chapter 1. Out on the tip of Pier 54, huddled in their coats against the battering wind, NYPD detectives Chiara Corelli and P.J. Parker peered through the icy rain and the mist rising from the choppy water, intent on keeping the floater in sight. But the pale face, streaming hair, and waving arm seemed like a trick of the eye, appearing, disappearing, then appearing again. Corelli clamped her jaw closed to keep her teeth from chattering. A floater in the Hudson River was better than being trapped behind a desk, even if it was a lot warmer behind that desk today. She was thrilled that a scheduling fluke put them on top of the catch list. But she hadn't planned to be in the middle of the Hudson River spotting a floater in a freaky November storm, so she was underdressed in the leather coat and silk scarf she usually wore this time of year. She closed her eyes against the shifting wind and biting rain, stomped her feet, and wrapped her arms around herself. Nice irony. Survive the bullets, die from pneumonia. Her surgeon would be pissed. She'd strongly advised Corelli to take another month to allow her body to fully recover. But the better she felt, the harder it was for Corelli to stay home, so she'd pushed and pushed until the surgeon reluctantly approved her for limited duty. To the doctor, limited meant sitting behind a desk. To her it meant anything other than brawling with the bad guys. Another blast of wind whipped her dripping hair in her face and pulled at her soaked leather coat. She shivered and hunched her shoulders, trying to stay warm. If the divers don't get here soon, they'll have one frozen body in the water and two on the pier. Over there. Parker pointed to a boat slowly making its way toward them. The activity on the boat was a blur, but if she squinted, she could make out 4 or 5 people milling around and 2 in wetsuits adjusting their air tanks for the dip into the freezing Hudson River. Though a recovery mission like this one didn't have the same imperative as a rescue operation, it seemed to her the crew was moving in slow motion while she and Parker were freezing their asses off. Of course, she had no one to blame except herself. She could have delegated this to one of the many police officers on the scene, but she would never ask anyone to do something she wouldn't do herself. She pulled the collar of her coat tighter, but it wasn't meant for this weather and didn't do much to stem the trickle of water running down her neck and back, or to protect her from the wind and sleet. But at least she wasn't the one swimming in the Hudson River. The diver slipped into the water and swam toward the pier in line with Corelli and Parker. They quickly located the woman, waved, and went under, taking her with them. A minute or two later, one diver surfaced and towed the body toward shore. Let's go, Parker. With the gusting wind and sleet battering them, it was slow going on the icy boards, and as they neared the end of the pier, Corelli stumbled. Parker grabbed her and kept her on her feet. Let me help you to the car. It's unlikely the medical examiner will find anything. I'll check and let you know. Corelli pushed Parker's hands off her. Damn it, stop treating me like an invalid. Just because I've been away 2 months doesn't mean you're in charge. I decide who does what when, remember? Limited duty doesn't include standing for hours in the middle of the Hudson River in a freaking ice storm. Damn, Corelli. Not even 2 full days back and you're suicidal. Parker veered in the direction of the tent setup so the medical examiner could do his job without his eyeballs freezing. Corelli followed. One of the diving team was leaving the tent and held out a hand to stop them. There's another girl trapped deeper. Meg will bring her in once she frees her. Girl? Yeah. He shook his head. Kids. Shit. Be careful what you wish for. That warm desk was looking better and better. They moved into the tent and stared down at the small body marbled blue and white from the icy water, long blonde hair, unseeing blue eyes, tiny mouth hanging open, and small hands limp at her side. Every cop's nightmare. The guy standing over the girl looked up. Hey, you can't come in here. Parker flashed her badge. Detectives Corelli and Parker. Oh, sorry. I'm Rob Willis, the new medical legal investigator. Corelli ignored the hand he extended and focused on the girl. She appeared to be about 8 or 9 years old, the age of her niece Gabriella. Bastards, Parker said, as another body was gently placed next to the first. The second girl was darker, long brown hair, brown eyes, olive skin, and maybe a little older. Corelli studied the bodies. The kids are the hardest, aren't they? Willis's question pulled her attention to him. Yeah, they are. I have a niece about the same age. And I a daughter. Willis checked the girls for broken limbs and head wounds. He studied their necks, made some notes, then called for body bags to transport them to the morgue. They haven't been in the water very long, but I'm sure, as you know, even a short time will eliminate any trace evidence. Right now, my best guess is they were strangled. Thanks, Willis. Corelli and Parker moved aside to make room for the morgue technicians and left them to it. Wondering whether she'd ever be warm again, Corelli headed for the two divers packing their gear. Seeing her approach, one of them muttered "traitor" and turned his back. The blood rushed to her face. Interesting. She was surprised her body was capable of flushing right now. Parker tensed. The ostracism hadn't been bad since she returned, but it was still there. Though being shot while catching a murderer helped the men and women in blue remember they once respected her, some police would always see her as a traitor. Sorry, Corelli. You don't need that shit while you're dealing with two dead girls. Drummond, the supervisor of the diving team, saying her name brought her back to the freezing riverside. Not your fault he's an ass. Corelli pointed to the pier. Bodies don't usually wash up down here. Why did these two end up out there? Normally the tides and river flow would have dragged them downstream, but all the recent storms have washed a lot of debris downriver, some of it accumulated around the piles under the pier. The girls got snagged on the debris. One of them hadn't pulled loose enough to float to where she could be seen from the pier. They might never have been found. Corelli put her hand on the shoulder of the other diver who'd retrieved the girls, someone she'd known since the academy. Meg, I have to ask, are you sure they were the only two? It's pretty murky down there, so no guarantees, but I poked around, and I didn't find any others. Thanks. Good job as always. Stay warm. Corelli felt the impulse to wrap her arms around herself, but with each icy gust of wind, she clenched her whole body. Damn. If she didn't get inside soon, she would be shivering and her teeth would be chattering. Her gaze swept the clusters of police watching them. Determined not to show weakness, to project strength instead, she willed her shoulders to straighten and her voice to remain steady and greeted those who acknowledged her. As they approached their car, she extended her hand. Give me the keys to our car. It'll be more comfortable than the back seat of an unheated patrol car, so meet me there with the witness. Corelli started their unmarked vehicle, raised the heat to high, and moved to the back seat. She allowed herself to shiver and her teeth to chatter for a few seconds before rubbing her hands together to warm them, then drying her face with tissues they kept in the car. She was pretty sure she was soaked down to her underwear, but she couldn't do anything about that or her ice-cold feet right now. She looked up when Parker opened the door. Ms. Connors, this is Detective Corelli, Parker said. She waved Jean Connors, a witness, into the car, closed the rear door, and slipped behind the steering wheel. The poor woman looked as cold as Corelli felt. Sorry to keep you so long, Miss Connors, but we needed to wait for the bodies to be retrieved before speaking to you. There was more than one? Two. Corelli waited a second for that to sink in. Girls. Around 8 or 9. Corelli wasn't sure whether Connors shivered from the cold or the news. Oh, my God. 2 girls. I thought it was a woman, but you know there were waves, and her hair was floating, and her face was blurry, so at first I wasn't even sure it was a person until I saw the hand waving. What happened? How did they get there? We'll find out. Tell us about this morning. Why were you on the pier so early on such a cold morning? What made you stop and look at the water? I'm a writer. I walk every morning to get my blood flowing and to mull over ideas for my current story. I had a great idea this morning. Usually I stop and make notes, but the wind and sleet made that impossible, so I decided to think through the idea instead. Anyway, I was gazing out into the water, not really seeing it, but trying to imagine where the idea would take the story. Then a gust of wind made me close my eyes, and when I opened them, I thought I saw a woman in the water. She kept dipping and disappearing, so I decided she must be an illusion and went back to my thoughts. When I looked again, she was still there. It took me a few minutes to realize she wasn't moving and that all I was seeing was her head and occasionally an arm was thrown up. So I called 911. Was anyone else on the pier? Not that I noticed. On a day like today, not many people walk out that far. Neither would I normally, but I was so involved in my plot I didn't notice how far I'd gone. Did you leave the pier to call? I was freezing, but I thought I might not be able to find her again if I left, so I waited to point her out to the police. It was obvious she hadn't murdered the girls, so there was no need to hold her any longer. Thank you, Miss Connors. We'll get back to you if we have more questions. Can we drop you somewhere? My apartment is just a few blocks from here. After they dropped Connors off, Corelli moved to the front seat. Parker sat with the car in neutral. What's next? A gigantic cup of coffee. Stop at the cafe near the station. When we get back, we need to check whether the girls were reported missing, and then the ring of Parker's phone cut her off. Depp, Parker mouthed the medical legal investigator's name. Thanks. We're on our way. She broke the connection. Depp undressed the girls as soon as they arrived and found something she thinks we should see. Okay. After we pick up coffee, head to the morgue. Parker tapped the steering wheel, gazed at the street in front of them, and made no move to put the car in gear. Just as Corelli was about to object, Parker shifted to face her. We're close to your apartment. Should I run you home so you can change into dry clothes first? Corelli glared at her. She'd had the same thought, but how dare Parker assume she needed special treatment? She controlled the urge to scream, but couldn't contain the anger in her voice. No, Mommy, I don't think so. Parker threw up her hands. Sorry, I didn't mean to be considerate. She put the car in drive and turned toward the coffee shop. The frosty atmosphere in the car made the outside temperature seem pleasant. Corelli knew she needed to get a handle on her emotions. Seeing those two little ones triggered a memory of finding an Afghani woman and her 3 young daughters raped and slaughtered because the woman's husband fought against the Taliban. Parker didn't need to be attacked for something she had nothing to do with and for caring. She hated to show weakness, but she also hated that her nastiness made Parker afraid to suggest something that would make her feel better and protect her. She was soaked to her skin, and the last thing she needed was a bad cold or even worse, pneumonia. Parker knew she wasn't completely healed from her gunshot wounds and would probably silently celebrate her being sensible for a change. You're right. We're close to my apartment. I think I'd better change into dry clothing and put on a warmer coat. Instead of the smart-ass comment or raised eyebrows Corelli half expected, Parker turned in the direction of her apartment. My pants are soaked from the knee down. I think I might have some jeans still at your place from when I was staying over to care for you, so I'll change too. A half hour later, they were back in the car. Coffee, then the morgue. Chapter 2. Parking on First Avenue near the building that housed the City of New York's office of the chief medical examiner in the Manhattan morgue was a bitch, so Parker threw their official sign on the dashboard and double-parked. They dropped the remains of their coffee into a bin before entering the building and waited in the busy reception area at the front desk for someone to escort them in. An assistant greeted them and led them back to the autopsy area. He handed them gowns and masks and waited until they put on the protective gear before opening the door to the room. Grim-faced, Gloria and Depp looked up from the computer as they entered. The girls lay side by side on steel tables. Naked, they looked even smaller and more fragile than they had when pulled from the river, and Depp moved to stand between the tables. When I undressed them, I was, as we usually do, noting and photographing scars, bruises, and any marks that might be a clue to who the deceased is or how they died. I want you to look at this. She parted the blonde's legs, then did the same for the dark-haired girl. Both had extensive bruising on their upper thighs. I'll know after the autopsy, but I'm almost positive we'll find vaginal and anal tearing. Corelli glanced at Parker and could see her struggling for control. She pushed back her own sadness and reached for professional distance. What are we looking at? She wanted to hear it in Depp say it. I believe the girls were sexually abused, not just once, but multiple times. She turned the blonde over, displaying her back and buttocks. She ran her fingers over the extensive scars. These scars are healed, but they appear to be the result of a whip, and we can assume that it was used on her more than once. Corelli rubbed her eyes. She didn't want to see this, but she forced herself to look. And the other girl? Depp turned over the dark-haired one. She seems to have escaped being whipped. Different Johns, different tastes. Parker didn't attempt to hide her anger. Depp gazed at Parker a few seconds before answering. Yes, Detective Parker. It appears that way. One other thing. Depp lifted the foot of the dark-haired girl and pointed to a raw spot on her heel, and then displayed the same raw spot on the blonde girl's heel. She gently lowered both legs to the table. The same mark in the same area on both right heels is too uniform to be fish nibbling. I'd guess someone used a knife post-mortem to slice off something. Probably tattoos. She stepped away from the bodies to retrieve a metal tray. I found these sewn into the hem of the darker one's dress. She extended the tray. I've already checked. There are no fingerprints. You can touch them. Corelli picked up the small metal saint, the kind you would wear on a chain, and an American flag pin, the kind that lots of politicians wore. This looked like an expensive one. The saint may be hers. She could have found the flag or stolen it. Maybe we're looking for a pedophile politician or one of the many other phony patriots who seem to dominate the news these days. You think a politician did this? Parker asked. Wouldn't be the first time, and given the vile politicians crawling out from under slimy rocks these days, I wouldn't rule it out. Corelli put the medal and pin back in the tray. One girl showing signs of abuse like this could be attributed to a single sexual predator. I may be wrong, but my gut says that two obviously unrelated girls abused like this indicates it's someone providing girls for sex. If their heels were tattooed, it indicates an organized effort, and a lot more girls involved. I'm afraid you're right. Good luck finding the bastards. And Depp walked them out of the room. The autopsies are scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. I expect we'll confirm strangulation as the cause of death. They discarded their gear and bid her goodbye. They were silent until they were driving across town. So what do you think is our next step, Parker? Check to see whether any other girls have turned up dead. Answering a question with a question? Surely you can do better than that, Ms. Former ADA. Sorry. Shit, Parker. I know it's been a couple of months, but do I have to give you the apologizing speech again? Pussyfooting around an answer irritates me. Acting like you don't know what you're doing irritates me. Apologies irritate me the most. Just answer the frickin' question with a little confidence. Corelli blew out a breath. Jesus. If you'd been this namby-pamby when I was bleeding out, I wouldn't have made it here to give you this lecture. So suck it up. You damn well know what to do. Wow. Here I was thinking that nearly 2 months away had helped your PTSD. I'd almost forgotten how nasty you can be. It only took a day and a half for you to start attacking me, and 3 times in less than 3 hours is a bit much, even for you. I don't have PTSD. If I did, you would have driven me to suicide already. You do have PTSD. I was outside your hospital room day and night while you were there and in your apartment a number of days and nights before I went back to work. I heard your screams. I know you have nightmares. I know you don't sleep. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's the result of honorably serving your country and your city. Her rage ignited, and as it flamed higher, her voice rose. You don't know a damn thing about me, Parker, about how honorably I served or whether or not I sleep. I will not tolerate this bullshit. If you continue, I'll find someone else to work with me. Don't scream at me. Parker pulled into a bus zone and turned to Corelli. PTSD is brought on by stress, and dealing with 2 murdered girls about the same age as your niece is definitely stressful in my book. I was hoping you would talk to Gil Gilardi about the PTSD, but I guess you managed to fool her like you fool almost everyone except me. What do you know about Gil Gilardi? Corelli snarled. I sure hope you didn't float your PTSD theory to her. I beg your pardon. I protected your privacy so far, so why would I talk to the department psychologist about your mental state when I was there to talk about shooting someone and stopping your bleeding? You're obsessed with the idea of me having PTSD, so why wouldn't you? And to answer your question, I didn't talk about anything other than getting shot and shooting someone. Exactly what I needed to talk about to get cleared for the job. Gilardi tried to get me to continue in therapy privately, and you know, Parker, I actually wondered whether you'd planted the seed. I'm done with this conversation. I think we both could use some quiet time. Parker started the car and pulled into traffic. Corelli opened her mouth to have the last word and thought better of it. She gazed out the window, trying to breathe the way Dr. Gilardi had demonstrated. She wasn't sure if she got it right, but just focusing on something other than her rage helped calm her. Maybe she needed to think about Gilardi's suggestion that she do yoga to ease her alleged PTSD. They passed the next 5 minutes in silence. Now tell, don't ask me. What the hell would you do next, Parker? Parker glanced at her, then looked back at the street. She paused so long that Corelli wondered whether she'd finally pushed too far. 1. Approach missing persons and special victims about the girls. 2. Search the FBI database for other children who have turned up dead with similar heel marks. 3. Follow up on that religious medal. Maybe ask Father Bart if he recognizes it. 4. Send inquiries to nearby departments in New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. 5. Try to trace the clothing. That's all I come up with now. Good. I'd add asking Vice whether there are any brothels in the city specializing in children, or if any of the online sex sites are offering children. Child sex trafficking? Parker sounded surprised. Corelli breathed deeply, trying to control her impatience. Parker didn't want to accept it. Well, she didn't want to see it either, but they needed to deal with what they had, not what they wished they had. As I said, 2 girls about the same age, who don't appear to be related, probably sexually assaulted more than once, beaten, strangled, heels shaved and tossed in the river? It seems like a good possibility. Either that or there's a serial child kidnapper, rapist, and murderer with a heel fetish out there that we haven't heard about. Take your pick. The grim set of Parker's mouth indicated she got it. They drove back to the station in silence. Chapter 3. It was another snowy, sleety, icy, wet day. The good news, they'd spent the day in the warm station house making calls and doing research on computers. The bad news, they'd spent the day in the warm station house making calls and doing research on computers, and they'd made absolutely no progress on the investigation into the death of the 2 girls. There hadn't been a missing person report filed for either girl. Plenty of kids had been murdered around the country, but none of them could be tied to the 2 girls. Father Bart had confirmed that the religious medal was a Virgin of Guadalupe, which, like the girls' coloring and features, pointed to a possible Mexican connection, but that led nowhere. The clothing turned out to be inexpensive, so the labels were no help, and Vice had no leads on a brothel with children or online sex sites offering them. Since coming home from Afghanistan, being trapped inside was intolerable for Corelli, but walking outside on the snow and ice was risky. Falling would make her look weak, and worse, might set back her recovery. She hated being afraid. Add to that their lack of progress, and she was unable to control her rage, causing her to dump on Parker again. Happily, Parker was fighting back, but the tension wasn't doing either of them any good. In the uneasy silence of the car as Parker drove her home, Corelli knew she was on the edge. Her usual coping mechanisms, attacking her punching bag, and a long soak in her hot tub hadn't helped last night. Running usually relaxed her, but her leg wasn't strong enough yet. She'd never felt so out of control, never felt so afraid she'd explode and hurt somebody. It didn't help that her brain was replaying conflated images of her niece Gabriella, the 2 girls in the morgue and the girls in Afghanistan. She closed her eyes and rested her head against the car seat. Try yoga. Dr. Gil Gilardi threw out the suggestion after she confirmed she only slept 2 or 3 hours a night. You're kidding, right? She glared at the therapist, who seemed to be doing her best Buddha imitation. No way. I run and box and lift weights. I don't need to do that pretentious make-believe exercise. Why would you even suggest it? Gil ignored the condescension in her voice. Because a lot of veterans find it helps with post-traumatic stress. I can recommend classes taught by veterans for veterans. I don't have PTSD, but even if I did, I find it hard to believe twisting myself into a pretzel would help. You're probably right about that, but these classes concentrate on breathing to control anger and promote less aggressive behavior. She wrote something on a pad and handed it to Corelli, in case you decide to do something about your PTSD. Corelli gasped. Her eyes popped open. Parker glanced from the road. You all right? Yeah. She must have dozed off. How weird was it that her mind replayed the conversation she'd had with Gilardi right before she'd approved her return to the job. Despite what she said to Parker and Gilardi, Corelli knew she had PTSD, but addressing it would let feelings loose she'd rather not deal with. Hopefully time would cure her. The dreams had continued during her 2 months of sick leave, but she'd remained calm. Now 3 days back on the job, and she was in a rage. Before she was shot, she was mostly able to control the rage, but when it seeped out, she'd unloaded it on Parker. Yet Parker had kept her secret. Today she'd been harsh with Watson and Dietz. She thought Captain Winfrey suspected she was hiding something, maybe even suspected PTSD, and if her erratic behavior came to his attention, he might put her on medical leave again. She glanced at Parker. She was strong and loyal, a good detective. She had saved her from bleeding out, had not left the hospital until she was out of danger, and had helped care for her during her recovery. She deserved to be treated better. Therapy wasn't an option. Though she was never sure whether to call Marnie her partner or lover or girlfriend, Corelli was sure she wasn't ready to deal with Marnie's death and the other scars of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. But she had to do something different before she went crazy, or worse, hurt someone. It was worth a shot. She dug in her wallet and found the slip of paper. Yoga for Warriors. The name was intriguing. Do you have time to wait for me to get some stuff from my apartment? Then drop me off downtown, near Franklin Street. It's personal. Sure, no problem. Corelli changed quickly into her warmest sweats, a Henley, a sweatshirt, warm socks, and sneakers, pulled on her down coat, and took the elevator to the street. As she exited the building, Parker jumped out of the car, weapon drawn, eyes scanning the street. She slid into the passenger seat, and when Parker started the car, gave her the address. She could feel Parker's interest, but she didn't ask where she was going or why. Good night, Parker. See you in the morning. Parker was standing in the cold on guard as usual, but didn't respond. Corelli took the elevator to the third-floor studio. She reached for the glass door, then pulled back. This was stupid. Yoga is for yuppies. Before she could turn away, a barefoot woman with close-cropped salt-and-pepper hair wearing a tank top and soft pants the color of fatigues smiled and waved her in. The woman's muscular build, tattoos, and the air of command that made Corelli want to salute signaled a veteran. Shit. Caught. Corelli straightened her shoulders and entered. The woman greeted her with an outstretched hand. I'm Billy Maiorisi, a veteran of both Iraq and Afghanistan and the owner of the studio. Welcome. Chiara Corelli. She ordinarily wouldn't share, but the woman held her gaze expectantly. Also a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. Maiorisi's handshake was firm, her gaze was direct, and she seemed to see Corelli's unease. Try a couple of sessions. Yoga can help if you can get into it. All our instructors are veterans who served in a war zone, so we understand the kinds of problems veterans are dealing with. It's a safe environment. She glanced at the clock on the wall. I'm teaching a beginner's class in 15 minutes. If you decide to stay, hang your coat in the locker room, pay at the desk, and wait here for me. Corelli sat on the bench in front of an empty locker. She could walk out and never come back, but she'd come because she was feeling out of control and dumping on Parker again. That wasn't right. That wasn't her, or at least it wasn't who she used to be before Afghanistan and the 3 months undercover that followed. Leaving wouldn't alleviate the rage, wouldn't keep her from spewing her anger at Parker. She hated how it made her feel. She could tolerate almost anything for an hour, so why not give it a try? She stuffed her gloves into her pockets, hung her coat and scarf, and threw in her sweatshirt. She returned to the reception area, paid for the class, and while she waited, observed the men and women entering, all sizes, all colors, some in suits, others more casual, some with tattoos, some with visible injuries, and some like her with hidden injuries. They were all obviously military. Though she didn't know them, these people, the survivors of the disastrous and demoralizing Iraq and Afghanistan wars, would understand her experience. Maybe yoga would help. She relaxed. Apparently 3 different classes were starting at the same time, but Maiorisi had pegged her as a beginner and came to bring her into the room where the class was being held. Get a mat, couple of weights, and a wooden block, then find a spot on the floor. The way this works is, I model the pose, and then everyone does it to the best of their ability. Don't worry if you can't do it at first, or if it's not exact, or if you can't hold it as long as the others. That comes with experience. She waited until Corelli was sitting on her mat. Is it all right if I touch your body to correct a pose? I'll always tell you before I do. I think I'll be okay if you warn me. Do you have any injuries I should avoid? She hadn't thought about the bullet wounds. I do have some wounds that are still healing. She indicated her leg and shoulder and arm. Don't worry, I'm careful. Maiorisi smiled. I have no desire to be slugged. She glanced at the clock, then clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. We have a new member tonight. Her name is Corelli. After allowing time for the smiles, nods, and some grunted greetings, Maiorisi demonstrated the first pose and then moved around correcting people. As promised, she always warned before touching. Much of the class was devoted to breathing, and Maiorisi spent a lot of time with her while the more experienced students held the poses. At the end of the hour, Maiorisi guided them through a relaxation exercise, and then ended the class. Corelli had worked up a good sweat, so she appreciated the cool-down. While she put on her socks and shoes, a young vet who'd been next to her during the class did the same, except one of her shoes was part of a prosthetic leg. Hi, Corelli, right? I'm Sarah. First time.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?